Picture the next World Cup with no Germany, no France, no Spain, the team that just lifted the trophy, no England, no Italy's neighbors, none of it. Sounds impossible, right? Except right now, that scenario is being discussed in a real meeting room by real football officials, and it's not a joke. Just days after Spain beat Argentina in the final, FIFA dropped a plan that's turned the football world upside down. Gianni Infantino wants to sell a piece of the World Cup itself to private investors, and UEFA's response has been blunt. They're openly talking about a boycott. This isn't a rumor from some anonymous account. This is coming from FIFA's own statements, from UEFA's own press releases, and from a growing list of governments weighing in. So how did we get from celebrating the biggest World Cup in history to European football threatening to walk away from FIFA entirely? Stick with me, because this story is moving fast, and by the end, you'll understand exactly why this fight could reshape the sport for the next decade. So what's really happening here? Let's start with what actually landed on the table. On Tuesday, FIFA confirmed it wants to launch something called FIFA Forward Enterprise. The idea is to combine FIFA's commercial rights, things like broadcasting deals, sponsorships, ticketing, and licensing, into one new company. Then FIFA would sell up to 20% of that company to outside investors. The numbers are enormous. FIFA is valuing this new entity at around $20 billion, and the initial sale is expected to raise somewhere close to $4.2 billion. To put that size in context, FIFA says the 2026 World Cup alone brought in somewhere between $12 and $15 billion in revenue, a massive jump from the previous cycle. Two names keep coming up around the investor side. JP Morgan is advising FIFA on the deal, and the group expected to lead the actual investment is Thrive Eternal, a fund connected to Josh Kushner. His brother, Jared Kushner, happens to be Donald Trump's son-in-law. That detail alone has raised eyebrows, especially given how closely FIFA and the Trump administration worked throughout this year's tournament. FIFA insists this changes nothing about how the sport is run. Officials say FIFA keeps full control over governance, competition rules, the match calendar, and every regulatory decision. What's for sale, they argue, is only the commercial engine, not the sport itself. And there's a sweetener attached. Each of FIFA's 211 member federations could see their development funding jump from $8 million to $20 million for the next 4-year cycle, with more increases planned through 2038. If you're just finding this channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now, because this story has several layers we're about to unpack, and you won't want to miss where this goes next. Here's where things get interesting. UEFA didn't wait long to respond, and when they did, the language was some of the sharpest we've heard from a football body in years. Their statement said, "This crosses a line that the sport's governing institutions should never cross, and that the game's soul and governance are not assets to be traded, especially with so little transparency about who actually benefits." That's not diplomatic hedging, that's a direct shot at Gianni Infantino personally. And it didn't stop with words. Reports out of Europe say UEFA is accelerating plans for an emergency virtual meeting with all 55 of its member associations this week, specifically to discuss how to respond, and a boycott of FIFA competitions is reportedly on the agenda. Now here's why that threat actually carries weight instead of sounding like an empty gesture. This isn't the first time UEFA has used it. Back in 2021, FIFA seriously considered switching the World Cup to a 2-year cycle instead of 4. UEFA pushed back hard, made it clear a boycott was on the table, and FIFA eventually shelved the entire idea. So when European officials raise that same threat again now, FIFA has already seen what happens when they call that bluff. But there's another angle here that makes this round different. Infantino didn't just announce the plan and wait for feedback. He sent a letter to all 211 member associations, attaching a deadline. Associations have until September 19th to back the proposal, and there's a one-off payment on the table, reportedly worth up to $40 million per federation as an incentive to say yes. Miss that window, and the offer reportedly gets pulled. UEFA immediately called that move out publicly, saying the deadline alone tells you everything you need to know about how this plan is being pushed through. Critics see it as pressure tactics dressed up as generosity, a way to lock in support from smaller federations before opposition has time to organize.
FIFA, for its part, frames it as a limited-time opportunity it simply can't hold open forever. This matters because the vote isn't just about money anymore. It's become a test of who actually controls the direction of world football, FIFA's central leadership, or the confederations and national associations underneath it.
Before we go further, if you're enjoying how this story is unfolding, tap subscribe. We're covering World Cup fallout stories like this one every single week, and you don't want to miss the next update. The bigger issue is that this fight isn't happening in isolation. It's landing right on top of an already tense relationship between FIFA and the sport's European power base. Throughout this year's World Cup, FIFA's ties to the Trump administration kept drawing scrutiny. Trump chaired a White House task force connected to the tournament, FIFA opened an office inside Trump Tower, and back in December, FIFA even awarded Trump its first ever Peace Prize. Then came the Folarin-Balogun situation during the tournament itself. UEFA accused FIFA of lifting the American striker's suspension early after direct appeals from Trump, a decision UEFA said damaged the integrity of the competition. UEFA President Alexander Ceferin was reportedly so unhappy with how that was handled that he skipped the World Cup final entirely, a striking absence for the man who leads European football. So when the private investment plan landed just over a week after the trophy was lifted, it didn't arrive in a vacuum. For a lot of European officials, it read as one more example of FIFA leadership moving fast, involving Trump-linked investors, and expecting everyone else to fall in line afterward. This matters because trust is now the real currency being spent here. Even federations that might otherwise be open to new revenue streams are reportedly wary of how this specific deal is structured and who stands to benefit from it. There's also chatter building inside UEFA about something bigger than this one proposal. Sources say there's a growing push to find a candidate willing to challenge Infantino in FIFA's presidential election next March, with countries including Germany, Norway, Belgium, and Spain reportedly interested in making sure Infantino doesn't run unopposed. Infantino claims he already has written support from more than 200 of FIFA's 211 members, though critics point out those letters of endorsement can reportedly be withdrawn or reassigned, and some, like England's, were signed before the World Cup even finished. Some observers within European football are even comparing the backlash to the failed European Super League breakaway a few years back, a plan that also promised more money and also collapsed almost overnight once fan and federation anger reached a boiling point. Whether this ends the same way is still unknown, but the comparison alone tells you how seriously people inside the sport are taking this. Now let's talk about who actually feels this the most, the players and the fans. If a boycott ever became real, rather than just a bargaining chip, the World Cup as we know it stops making sense. Imagine a tournament without the reigning champion Spain, without Germany's history, without England, France, or Italy's football culture running through it. The competitive quality drops instantly, and so does the emotional weight the tournament carries for hundreds of millions of viewers across Europe. For players, the stakes are personal. Careers are built around these tournaments. A boycott threat hanging over the next cycle creates genuine uncertainty for anyone hoping to represent their country on that stage, especially younger players who spent years working toward a World Cup debut. Fans are caught in the middle too. Tens of thousands of European supporters already plan years in advance around World Cup travel, and qualification campaigns are already underway in some confederations. A serious governance crisis at the top doesn't just embarrass FIFA, it puts a cloud over every match being played beneath it, including the ones happening right now. And it's worth remembering, CONCACAF, the very confederation that co-hosted this year's tournament across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, says it only learned about FIFA's new investment plan through media reports, not through FIFA itself. If host confederations are finding out this way, it raises a fair question about how much consultation actually happened before any of this went public. Quick reminder before we move into where this could all be heading, subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep digging into stories like this one as they develop, so if you haven't already, now's a good time. So what happens from here? There are a few realistic paths, and it's worth being honest that nobody outside these closed-door meetings knows for certain which one wins out. The best-case outcome for FIFA is that UEFA's emergency meeting produces frustration and strong words, but stops short of a formal boycott vote, buying Infantino enough room to negotiate revised terms with European federations before the September deadline. FIFA has shown before that it can adjust financial terms once enough pressure builds, and a compromise on transparency or investor identity could cool things down without FIFA losing the deal entirely. The more disruptive scenario is that UEFA formalizes a boycott threat that other confederations start echoing, turning this from a European objection into a genuinely global standoff. Given how openly CONCACAF has already signaled it felt sidelined, that scenario isn't as far-fetched as it might sound. There's also the political angle to watch, with figures like the UK's Prime Minister already publicly stating that football doesn't belong to investors. This story has jumped from sports pages onto front pages, and government pressure tends to move federations faster than fan outrage alone. And then there's the leadership question hanging over all of it. If enough national associations decide this proposal is the final straw, Infantino may be walking into next March's election facing real opposition for the first time in years, something that would have felt unthinkable just weeks ago while he was still celebrating the tournament's record-breaking numbers. Whatever happens, the September 19th deadline is now a date worth watching closely, because it will tell us whether FIFA's member associations chose the short-term payout or chose to stand with UEFA's resistance. So here's where we land. FIFA wants private money in the game, backed by investors with direct ties to the Trump family, and European football is openly threatening to walk away from FIFA's biggest events over it. That's not a rumor. That's the actual state of world football right now, just days after we watch Spain lift the trophy. Would European nations really follow through on a World Cup boycott, or is this pressure designed to force FIFA back to the negotiating table? And if it did happen, which country do you think would be hit hardest by losing Europe from the tournament? Drop your prediction in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of story where being right early actually means something. And if you want to stay ahead of every twist as this plays out between now and that September deadline, make sure you're subscribed, because we'll be back the moment there's real movement on this.